Two founders, same expertise, same 20 years in the game. One charges 3 times more and is booked out for 12 months ahead and has a waiting list as long as my arm. The other is the best kept secret in the industry. Their work isn't so different. The ideas, the positioning, and who's heard of them. That's the real difference. Now, my guest today has spent her entire career on that exact gap. Welcome to The Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools and the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it. I have been warming up to you that I would have a surprise for our 400th episode on The Business Strategist. This particular lady, not only am I a big fan of her work, we've been following each other for numerous years, and she has kindly come onto the podcast. She reached out to me eventually after all of these years, but she works with a lot of work with Marshall Goldsmith, who I mentioned a lot on the podcast, and our good friend Alicia Cohn as well. We have the amazing Dory Clark here on the show, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Dory is a Wall Street Journal and US Today best-selling author of The Long Game and Stand Out. She's a 4 times Thinkers 50 top business thinker. And she teaches at Columbia Business School in the United States and writes for Harvard Business Review. And she's also writing and co-authoring a book with Marshall and Alicia, and is hopefully going to be out in the fall of 2027. So, without further ado, drum roll, please. Dory Clark, welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you for having me.
Yeah, listen, I'm excited. You can tell my energy is flowing through my veins. And listen, I've seen you on a lot of LinkedIn lives, and you have a lot of energy as well. I mean, we kind of on the same wavelength. So I just wanted to say that, by the way.
I love it. Thank you. Yes.
It's been I'm really looking forward, because I know that we're not just Marshall and Alicia in common. We have a lot of people in the Marshall Goldsmith coaching realm, don't we? We have a lot of other people within the network, and your name has propped up numerous times. Michelle Johnson being one of them, Morag Barat, which you might have heard, which you'll know of course. And so we seem to have crossed our paths quite so many times.
Yes. Well, this is overdue. I'm so glad to finally make it happen.
So before we get started, by the way, make sure you got a pen and paper handy. So, Dory's going to be dropping some massive value bombs, by the way, ladies and gents. Listen, let's get started. Let's have some fun. And, it's really interesting because, I mean, you're an ideas person, right? And you talk about things about ideas, whether it be in organizations, whether it be for small businesses. And now most of the people that are listening in are founders, Dory, but they think ideas is a marketing problem. Now, you've argued for many years that that's not the case. It's more of a strategy problem. Now, what's the distinction? What's the first thing that you have them do? Say you had a client that comes to you that may have a slightly different opinion about what you have. What do you get them to do? What is it that you show them that it actually isn't? What is it that is maybe impacting their business, especially when you go into businesses and organizations? I'd love to hear your experience about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. I mean, certainly sometimes people have strategy problems, sometimes they have marketing problems, and sometimes they have both. And part of the goal is to try to uncover exactly what's happening. I think that on the strategy level, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that a lot of people talk to me about, I've been writing for the Harvard Business Review for 16 years now. So I have a lot of reps under my belt, about 200 articles that I've done for them. And so a lot of times folks come to me and they're interested in figuring out how to break into that or to other high profile publications. And I think in a situation like that, often they are convinced it is a marketing problem in the sense of like, well, I just need an introduction. I just need an introduction to an editor, and then they will see that it is, this great idea. And that is true sometimes. But I think what is more often true actually is a strategy problem. And I'm saying this because I think it is a metaphor for a lot of things. When I say a strategy problem, it is that what we often don't take the time to do is to realize the particularities of a situation. You might be a great writer. You might be a great writer for other publications, but every magazine or blog or whatever has their own house style. And HBR in particular does. There are things that you do and you don't do. It's, for a publication, it's, do you do first person or third person? Do you have lots of stats, or do you have lots of personal stories and anecdotes? Or do you have lots of interviews with experts? What's the mix of things? What's the appropriate length? And people haven't necessarily taken the time to reverse engineer for that publication. What is the appropriate way to do it? And so, I might look at it and say, well, an introduction to the editor is not going to help at this point because there are problems we need to solve upstream. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that for a lot of our issues around visibility, it's something similar. We might think we understand what the presenting problem is or how to solve it, but we often need to peel back the layers in a more holistic way. And so that's what I've really tried to figure out how to do for myself, and what I have tried over the past decade to help other people do, because it annoys me sometimes that it's so hard to figure out how to get your ideas heard. Like it feels like sometimes there's a lot of secrecy around it, around what's the right thing to do, or, how do people actually do it? And I believe in transparency in general, and I want to make it accessible to people. So that's what I try to do.
Very good. Love that. Some juicy stuff going out there, by the way. Now, it's really interesting as well, because one thing that I know about you is that you're also an introvert, aren't you? You're quite introverted, but you don't show it, if you don't mind me saying so. Like when you're articulating the way you feel, or you're expressing yourself in a certain way. How do you, as an introvert in particular, because I know that a lot of people here that are very introverted, they're a little bit shy. How do you battle the whole kind of ideology of trying to position yourself as an expert alongside trying to gain traction or attention or visibility? How do you balance that with what you've done in your experience over the last 20 years?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Adam. And I'm going to tease apart a few concepts and a few terms. So something that commonly gets conflated, but actually are, according to the research, two different things, is introversion and shyness. And it's useful in the sense that I am an introvert, meaning at the end of a long day of socializing or being with people or whatever, I'm just tired out. I kind of want to go home and be quiet, or what have you. And plenty of people are like that.
Yeah, yeah.
30 to 50% of people are introverts. The thing that is more salient, I think, when it comes, certainly it matters for networking, right? Because the extroverts can just keep going. But when it comes to other elements of self promotion, the thing that's really relevant is the shyness question. Because according to the way that researchers define it, shyness is actually something slightly different. It is about a fear of judgment of other people. That's why people are shy. And so there's, you can think of, doing your little 2x2, right? Some people are shy and introverts. Some people are introverts and not shy. I'm actually not shy. And I have a fairly healthy disregard of what other people think, which, people might be like, well, nice for you. But I grapple with this actually on a regular basis, because my sweet wife, who's very talented, she's a professor at Harvard. She has many, many good ideas. I want her to get them out into the world. We have these debates all the time because she is actually quite shy. And
Hmm.
so I have to, really sort of meet her where she's at. And it gives me, I think, a real sense of empathy around it. Of course, I also run a community for the past decade called Recognized Expert for folks who are in a similar position of wanting to, they're smart, competent people who want to get their ideas heard more. So I've seen this in many different ways, but it's really hard when every stray comment on Instagram, just like sears into your soul. And I think it is a muscle that we have to build to just remind ourselves that, random people on the internet, some people have so little going on in their lives that it is fun for them to spend time commenting on random strangers' posts. But if we actually think about this for more than 5 seconds, you realize that these people just are the biggest losers because they literally have time to comment on random people's posts. So it's almost a tautology, Adam.
My God, and also when you get to a level of success in your career and you build up a brand, you build up a reputation, do you find that that becomes more regularly occurrence, especially with where you're positioned in what you do as well?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that early on there's a little bit of a mismatch because when people are first getting started and they're nervous about putting themselves out there, the part that they're usually worried about is, oh no, people are going to have negative comments, they're going to be mean about me. And what is far more common is actually kind of the opposite, which is that you will be ignored and no one will comment at all. And that is the problem that we need to deal with and address. It's just numerical, right? Like if no one really knows who you are, then the people who are commenting are going to be like your friends and your mom. Like they're probably not going to be mean. But yes, it is true that there's different challenges that you have to face at different levels. And as you start to get a little bit more momentum, then you do numerically get people who see your stuff that are random people that want to say something mean. And it's like, okay. I mean, it sounds a little glib sometimes to say, well, it's a sign of success, but it actually is in terms of the numbers because it means your your material has been seen by enough people so that the randos are now seeing it. I don't know. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I go back to this kind of fear of judgment. That's the main reason why most people don't want to, I suppose, not create attention, but get attention. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
And I think that, especially with a lot of our listeners who are operators, they're founders, they've been working in the business as operators for such a long period of time. When you start to make those transitions, Dory, and I start to say to them, well, what about building your brand so that you can create a bigger impact? That's what you want to do, right? And then they're like, oh, I'm not sure about that. And the biggest thing and then it goes back to, well, what's the reason for that? And you rightly alluded, the fear of judgment is the number one reason why people don't build a brand for that reason. And then obviously you've got the battle of the two personalities, introverts and extroverts. I mean, a lot of the clients that I'm working with, accountants and attorneys and things like that, they can be very introverted. Yeah, they don't want to be seen as I want to sell myself, like a self kind of promotional thing. I mean, I don't know about I've never really had that struggle, but you being you, did that ever occur to you in your career? Is there any tips that you have for clients that maybe come to you, even CEOs, I guess, big CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that must come to you and say, I don't want to do that, Dory.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it makes perfect sense. I mean, no one wants to look like a jerk. No one wants
Yeah,
to, embarrass themselves.
right.
But I think that what people often don't understand, and I think to be honest, Adam, I think sometimes they purposely fail to understand it to give themselves an excuse to not engage in this. So I wanna be clear in calling
Yeah.
that out. But something that I think is the case is that there is a very wide spectrum.
Hmm.
And no one is saying, promote yourself so hard that people want to run away from you. That's
No,
not helpful at all.
no.
There was actually a great study by Robert Cialdini at Arizona State and Jeffrey Pfeffer at Stanford about self promotion. And what they discovered is that, number one, surprise, surprise, if you are seen as being overly self promotional, no one will like it. They won't want to talk to you. They won't want to listen. So we know it doesn't work if you do it too much. But the interesting part is that in this experiment that they ran, they had a sort of experimental group. And in the experimental group, they had someone else be your wingman, sort of be your agent. And that person would, kind of go around and be like, you've got to meet my friend Adam. He's really amazing. He has this cool podcast and they've had 400 episodes and blah, blah, blah. And afterwards, what they discovered is the people who had been approached with, by the wingman talking about how great Adam was, they all wanted to meet Adam. Like they really are interested in this. But the question is, how do you either get people talking about you or talk about yourself in a way so that it actually feels helpful and useful to the other person rather than just chest thumping? And I think as long as we keep our mind trained to the idea that it has to be in service of the other person rather than in service to our ego, then they'll actually welcome it.
Yeah, and I think, interestingly enough, I remember having some great conversations with Bob Berg, who wrote.
Yes.
He's a great guy, Bob Berg. We love Bob, and John Spencer's as well. He talks a lot about the importance of this idea of giving value, and value is very subjective, as we both know. But also, I kind of feel like when you give value, then there comes likability. You know,
Yes.
people don't do business with jerks, as like you alluded to. They do it because they like you and they have a good feeling about you. And I'm a big into energy, by the way. We've got a great connection. We've got some great alignment. People, you're going to create a great impression, and that's the reason why. And then you don't need to do self promotion. Like other people do it for you, right? It's 10 times more powerful. Yeah. So I totally relate to what you're saying is what I'm trying to get at. So,
That's great.
but I love that. Some good stuff. Interesting. Now, I was reading a post the other day actually on your feed around AI. Now, obviously, AI is obviously talk of the town these days, and I again, it's really interesting because I find that LinkedIn is turning into a bit of a cesspit for AI comments and posts, which is a real shame because it used to be such a great platform to be able to really build trust and relationships. And, it's very hard to distinguish someone that comes across as genuine, that really gives a monkeys, and someone that really is using AI to replace strategic thinking and their train of thought. I guess my kind of question around that is, what do how, in terms of like AI, how do you use AI? How is it changing the game for you in particularly? And what is it that they can do to use AI to maybe change their positioning or their content or their strategy? Because, I feel like, yes, AI is great, but it's also being used in the wrong ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, certainly. And afterwards, I'm gonna ask you because I always love good AI use cases. This is how we learn is learning from one another. But you raise a great point. I mean, it should be clear by now, although people still do it, where they'll sort of do the equivalent of hey ChatGPT, write me an article, and then they're somehow surprised when it sounds completely broad and generic and
Yeah.
not helpful. If you're going to use AI, you need to be more targeted and strategic about how you're doing it. And so, one example, just thinking about things literally in the past few days that I have used it for. So, I have it linked up with my Granola, which is a transcription tool that I really like.
Mhm.
And so, if I've had a coaching call, not only can I say, oh, hey, pull the transcript from this call, and it'll make a nice word formatted transcript. That's very handy and fast
Mhm.
and much easier than any previous process. But what it will do is I've created a skill in Claude where it will analyze that transcript and pull out the coaching principles that I am using in it. So all the things that were sort of implicit to me, where
Mhm.
I might, have a sort of move that I do of, oh, well, what we need to reframe it like this, or we need to think about it like that, or, whatever it is that I'm doing, I might do it in the moment instinctively because it's just honed over time. I think that's what a lot of coaches do. But instead, it is naming it, identifying it, calling it out, and then making a list of that methodology. So what is really helpful is that in addition to the transcript, it will pull out the coaching principles that I'm using. So things that would have been implicit to me before, just things that I'm doing instinctively or that are honed over time. It's naming them, it's calling them out, and it's listing them as parts of my methodology. And what's useful about that is, first of all, it makes the implicit suddenly available to me in a way that it wasn't before. And that becomes fodder that I can use for articles, for books, for social media content. It's right. That's the principle I'm using. Well, I should make a video about that. I should make an article about that. So that is one way where it's very helpful in terms of, not creating this sort of average slop, but instead taking the thing that I have been doing that was invisible and enabling me to leverage that and actually put it out into the world more effectively. That's one example. How are you using it?
Hey guys, I just wanted to take this opportunity to make you aware of a brand new tool that we've just created called the Exit Readiness Assessment. Now, it is for founders and CEOs that are looking to exit from their business operations. Now, it doesn't matter even if you're not looking to exit right now, I would highly recommend to go and take the assessment straight away. It helps you to identify areas in your business that you need to work on to help you towards that exit strategy. And at the end of it, you get a personalized report on some of the areas that you're doing particularly well in and some of the areas that you need to make some improvements to. Make sure you head over to readytoexit.scoreapp.com. That's readytoexit.scoreapp.com. Enjoy. Yeah, it's a great question. Similar to yourself, actually. One thing that, and again, for you guys that are listening, and this might be a really good tip, and just want to acknowledge Dory's great tip because I thought it was a very good thing, is if we're in the middle of doing a sales call, as an example, with a prospect, again, I will do something similar to yourself, but what I tend to do is tend to analyze some of the sales scripts that we've been doing, and I'll say, from this sales script, what are the things that we've done well, and what's some of the things that we can make improvements to? And I want you to try to combine psychology and neuroscience to combine to see out where people are in the process. Where are people? What could be done better? What could we have said to here? What could we do to follow up? So it's kind of like analyzing the breakdown and then looking for patterns. This is important. This is an interesting one, Dory. Looking for patterns with regards to, okay, well, hang on a second. You might have done a call, say, a week ago. You're repeating the same pattern, and that is causing friction between you, closing a sale or whatever it might be. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
that is one way that I'm using it anyway.
I love that. That's great.
So yeah, but that's more kind of sales perspective. But again, it depends on who we're speaking to. And another great example, actually, Dory, is it might be with a potential partnership, for example. And again, I might say to the AI, can you summarize what are some of the angles or some of the ways in which we could collaborate and create alignment?
Yeah, that's
So
very cool.
yeah. So that is just off the cuff, by the way. So, but it's a great question. So thank you for that. And I think it's again, you can use AI in so many different ways, but I think one of the things that I really harp on about is making sure that AI doesn't replace your strategic thinking. And I think that too many people are doing that. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's easier. It's much
Yeah.
easier not to do strategic thinking. And one of the most speaking of neuroscience, one of the most interesting and I think honestly funny things that it gets talked about in neuroscience is the idea of the brain as a cognitive miser. I love that term because I think it's just so apt. It's like, that's right. If I don't have to spend brain power, I'm not going to. And that is how basically everyone's brain is wired. We just do the path of least resistance. And so you have to really like consciously override that
Yeah.
because the tendency is always like, oh, great, I'll do the easy thing.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love that. Some very good stuff. One thing that I have really observed, Dory, and it might be a good observation for you, is this whole idea around positioning and the struggle that a lot of founders and a lot of business owners really really struggle with the whole positioning piece. I'm not sure if it's something that you've seen. You've written 4 best-selling books. You've written for Harvard Business Review for like 16 years. What do you think that people are getting wrong around the positioning part of it? It's not necessarily sales, but positioning themselves as the expert. What is it that they're doing wrong that you have maybe if there's some lessons to be learned from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's kind of two ways that people go wrong, sort of the top down and the bottom up
Mm,
problems. And I would say that we all have seen plenty of people that I'll say from sort of the top down, the following down, they are great at spreading the word about what they're doing, but there's actually not very much substance to what they're doing. That is, I'll call that a deeper problem because substance, takes
yeah,
takes a while to
it
build.
does.
The use case of the people that I work with are, and folks in the recognized expert community are folks who actually do have substance. They do have expertise. The question is, how do you get recognized for it? And in terms of it, I've actually developed a framework, which is as I understand it, I really spent a while trying to understand and codify what does it take to become an expert, and how do you know that it's working? Like what are the
Mhm.
pieces? And what I came to understand is that there's three constituent parts and they all kind of work together like a flywheel.
Okay.
And I will list them briefly. We can talk about any of them that you're interested in. One is content creation. And the reason that is so important is that if you are, let's say, an attorney, you're an accountant, any of the folks that you work with that listen to this, unless you are creating content that is visible to the outside world. This could be articles, this could be appearing on podcasts, this could be giving a speech at the bar association, whatever it is. Otherwise, the only way that a person would ever know you're any good or have any decent ideas is if they have literally worked with you personally. And that is a very limited audience,
That's
just
true.
definitionally. And it's not to say you can't get good referral business. Of course you can, but it limits it compared to the number of people that can see a speech online or that can be forwarded an article or read it in the local bar journal. So content creation is one piece. The second is, of course, your network, because you do need to be having conversations in the room, meeting the right people. You need people to be your advocates when you're not in the room so that they know who you are. And somebody says, "Oh, I needed this." And the person said, "Oh my gosh, Adam's your guy." So network is a key piece. And then the third part is social proof. And what I mean by this is basically what is your credibility at a glance so that busy people are willing to take a chance to spend their time to listen to you. Now, the good news is that, if you are, say, a professional service provider, like an accountant, like an attorney, you already have credibility in the sense of you have a degree, you have a certification, this is excellent. But it's a starting point. You're a credible human, but are you more credible than other people? That's the question, right? There's a lot of attorneys out there. And so social proof is a way of sort of separating you from the crowd. And there's a lot of ways you can do that too. Maybe it's because you've worked for prominent clients that everybody has heard of. Oh, well, if she's good enough to be the attorney for Google, she's got to be a great attorney. It could be that you are quoted frequently in the media. So the media think you're a go to source, and other people say, oh, well, if she's the one that's quoted in the media all the time, then clearly there's a reason for that. It could be that you're with a blue chip firm. It could be that you went to a really good school. It could be that you've won an award. Maybe you're a 40 under 40 in your city or whatever it is. There's a million ways of doing it. Maybe you do adjunct teaching at a law school, but find a few points of social proof and dive into them so that you can separate yourself from the crowd. If you have those pieces, content creation, network, social proof, that is how you create a flywheel and showcase your expertise so it can get recognized.
Mhm. Love that. Some good stuff. And I guess that's the kind of framework that you had followed throughout your career, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. I work the program.
Love that. Some good stuff. I want to talk about something which, and again, this is a belief system that I used to think, which was the whole kind of premise behind speed versus patience. So I used to believe, Dory, right, that the faster you were there to market, the more credible you are, the more successful you were, et cetera, et cetera. But then I'm kind of like learning from people like Gary Vaynerchuk, for example, that actually patience plays a very important part when it comes to running business. I mean, I know that there are people here that are thinking, okay, well, I've been more than patient. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, well, and the question is always, well, when is it going to come? Like, I've been a patient. Have you ever been in a situation like that, or have you ever coached someone where you're thinking, hey, their brain is moving at a million miles, maybe they're neurodivergent, I don't know, or and they're kind of thinking that, but and sometimes you just have to slow them down for whatever reason, or maybe they are the complete opposite where they've been too patient and you have to speed them up. Have you ever been in a situation like that? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about speed versus patience in business.
Yeah, it's a really important distinction, and my most recent book, The Long Game: How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World, definitely is on point for that struggle, Adam. I would say the way that I thread the needle on this is I actually have a chapter in The Long Game where I talk about what I call strategic patience, and the reason that I'm appending an adjective to it, that is strategic patience, is that I agree with you. It is wrong to be patient about a thing where you could be moving fast. I like to move fast. Like, let's bring it. We don't want to dawdle. But what I have come to realize, which is, honestly deeply frustrating but true, there are certain things that you actually literally have to be patient for, right? And this sort of example is like, okay, the farmer might want the crops to grow faster, but the crops are not going to grow faster. They are going to grow in the amount of time it takes for them to grow. And so I think the wisdom here is understanding the distinction between things where if you put in just a little bit more effort, a little more elbow grease, you move faster, it can actually yield something, versus the kind of things where if you try to make it move faster, it's just going to go really badly. If I've got a bunch of crops and I'm like, I know, I'll put a year's worth of rain on them next week. This is not going to happen. And similarly, you think about things like networks and building relationships. If you say, I know these people, wonderful. I'm going to get every connection I can out of them the next time I see them. Well, you're not going to have that connection for long. And so networking is a place where patience actually pays off in spades. And there are other examples like that. So it's really just trying to understand the distinction of where to have which strategy.
Yeah, love that. Some good, and I think I think and I've battled it with it for years. I'll be honest with you, I have battled it for years. So I'm like you. I'm an action taker. You give me something to do. I've already completed it an hour ago. Do you see what I mean? But then it kind of goes back to, well, if you jump into something too quickly, right, and you make decisions too quickly, there can be a detrimental effect to that because by moving too fast, you may have missed out on opportunity. So
Yes.
that's kind of like what I have found just again from my own observation and the way that I behave sometimes. And full disclosure, by the way, I'm not neurodivergent. I'm just kind of weird in a way.
Fair enough. I love it.
Very good. Love that. Now, talking about the long game, because I know it was well, it was a New York Times best-selling book, and in the book specifically, you talked a lot about someone who stuck it out and it all worked out. So, you talked about patience. What about the people that didn't make it? What's the honest signal that tells a founder that it's time to stop persisting and start maybe adapting or moving in a different direction? And because giving more time is the most expensive advice in business if it's wrong. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, you've put your finger, Adam, on the most critical question in all of this, which is how do we draw the line between, okay, patience is good, let's wait and it'll bear fruit, versus you're being an idiot, stop it, it's not going to work. And that's the thing we have to figure out together. And the metaphor that I have for that is entering the tunnel. Because when you are embarking on a long-term goal, something where it's like, okay, there's a big payoff, but it's not for a while, you really are entering a tunnel and you're working toward that goal. And the problem is that when you are in the tunnel, it is not clear. It's almost inherently not clear if the tunnel is 100 feet or 100 miles. And you get in there and you might feel like, oh my gosh, I have been going forever. This is ridiculous. Obviously, it's not going to work. The problem is that you didn't have the right scoping. And so there's two things that I think are really critical to do before you embark on whatever your strategic quest is. Number one is to try wherever possible to talk to people or to do research and learn about people who have done it before so that you can see how long it took them. That's the key, because assuming we're not talking about cracking some physics problem or something, probably whatever you've done, what you're trying to do, someone has done it before.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, I'm going to grow my company to 10 million. Okay, well, plenty of people have done that. So what does it look like in your field? What are the comps? And that's just a useful gauge, because if you think, oh, I can do it in 6 months, I mean, God bless if you can. I would be thrilled for you. But if the average of everyone that you talk to is, oh, well, that took 4 years, then don't be surprised if in 6 months it hasn't happened. You need to have sort of a set of expectations. And the second piece is about metrics. And specifically, I mean, everybody tracks metrics, right? They're tracking their sales, they're tracking their leads, they're doing all this stuff. But I want to talk about a slightly different, very important kind of metrics, which is, what are your leading indicators as compared to your lagging indicators?
Hmm.
Everybody is focused typically on the big haul at the end, like, oh, I've closed the sale, whatever it is. That could take a really long time. It can take a long time to land the big keynote talk. It can take a long time to, grow to a certain revenue, level. There's all these things where it's, I think of it as the thunderstorm, right? Like when it's raining and there's lightning and thunder, nobody can deny it. It's very, very clear. But the issue is we are waiting for raindrops. And what we need to do in order to provide evidence that we are on the right path, evidence to ourselves, is to understand the leading indicators so that we can track it and start to feel the raindrops and say, oh, well, the rainstorm is coming, the thunderstorm
Mm.
is coming. I can tell, we're just not there yet. So it might be things like tracking website hits or Google searches or AI searches about you. It might be, what is the number of incoming inbounds? Like, maybe at first they're unqualified leads. Okay, but is it more? Because that's useful. Is it that you are starting to see other evidence, maybe just anecdotally, when you start, meeting more people, you start to see 20% more people say, oh, I've heard of you. Those are the signs that show you're getting to the place you want.
So the premise behind the long game, because when I think of the long game, I think of a book of patience, really, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what it's about? Is that what kind of being in business for you is about? Is about, strategic patience and things like that? What is there any particular patterns or frameworks that you discovered? Was it within the book, or was it, and how did you kind of collect your data and evidence? Was it kind of interviewing specific people that you worked with throughout the book?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination, but I did interview dozens of people that I profiled in the book who I feel like had emblematic stories about aspects of this. And so just trying to highlight a lot of frameworks for people about how to think about this, because if you are a regular professional, if you're an entrepreneur, you like it or not, there are times that we have to be patient, and it annoys me deeply. I wish that we didn't, but when you do, I wanted to give people a toolkit for understanding, okay, this is the good kind of patience, where I just need to keep doing what I'm doing and know that it's working out, as compared to the bad kind of patience, where it's like, actually, I am wasting time here, or maybe I do need to try something different. I want to equip people to make better decisions in the moment. And that's really what I tried to do with the long game.
You know, one thing that's came to my mind, I just had an epiphany. One thing that I have experienced, and I know that a lot of our listeners has experienced, is the experience of being stuck. Everyone hates being stuck, right? Or they plateau, and they can plateau for weeks, months, years, whatever it might be, right? We've been there. But how do you distinguish between someone that is executing patience versus someone that is procrastinating how do you distinguish between those two, number one? And number two, what are some of maybe, I don't know, the warning signs that we can tell for ourselves? Because I'm a big believer of self-awareness. What do you say to some of your students and say, this is what you need to look for?
Yeah. I think that ultimately, when I was writing The Long Game, a couple months into writing it, I had this very funny realization, which is, oh my God, I'm writing a personal finance book. And of course, it's not a personal finance book. It's a business book, it's a career book. But ultimately, almost all of the principles in it could be mapped onto a guide, which is about, when it, how do you, despite short-term pressures, in the case of personal finances, oh my God, the market's tanking. What do I do? And you might, in your heart, you might want to sell it all. But we know that that is a bad move. And you need to make long term investments, and small things actually build up in a really shocking way. They
Mm,
compound if you do them long enough over time. And I realized, yeah, that's what the situation is. So, I mean, ultimately, it is about finding ways to separate yourself out from the noise. It's about essentially tying yourself to the mast. To use
mm,
a metaphor from Greek mythology. There were in Greek mythology, there were the sirens that would lure all the sailors to their death, and the only way that you could avoid them is if you preventatively tied yourself to the mast so that you wouldn't be lured by the sirens. And similarly, I think that the biggest thing with strategic thinking is just understanding you will be tempted in the moment. You'll be tempted to give up, or you'll be tempted to make some rash move, or to go for the new shiny thing or whatever. And it's not to say you can't change your strategy. You should. You should change your strategy when circumstances legitimately change.
mm,
But you
mm.
need to make a rational and not an impulsive decision about that. And so I think that, and one of the most important things is just recognizing, okay, we need to have regular reviews of it, but you don't want to be changing your strategy every 5 minutes and whipsawing, which so many people do. We all know that day traders do the worst when it comes to long-term investing. They churn everything. And it's the same thing with our personal strategy as well.
Love it. Some good stuff. I'd love for you to give us maybe a single exercise that may be done weekly or whatever it is that builds a competitive moat from your ideas, not just a concept, but walk us through maybe sort of a step by step, like, when you're sitting at the, say, kitchen table on a Sunday morning, for example, what's an exercise that we could do with our listeners that helps build a competitive moat for ideas? Any thoughts?
Well, I think that this honestly the simplest thing to do, Adam, or the way to think about it. I had a person in my community that I was talking to recently who was upset because she has a book that came out, and she just learned about somebody else who has another book that's going to come out. It's very similar in maybe
Hmm.
18 months. And she's like, oh no, this is going to ruin my positioning. This competitor is
Mm,
coming into the marketplace. We've all been there, right? And ultimately what she realized, which I think was exactly the right thing. I was proud. I didn't even say anything. I think I just, raised my eyebrows a little bit, and she's like, "Ah." She's like, so I really need to own this in the next 18 months, because all we have, we can't control what other people are doing,
no.
but you create a competitive moat because if you were the person who is out there and is talking about it so much through all the channels and all the vehicles that you have at your disposal, whatever kinds of content creation, you appear on podcasts, you speak at conferences, you write articles, or you share social media posts, or whatever it is. And you're building your network so that people know about that and then they amplify it. If you create the echo chamber, there's just no oxygen for other people to come in, and you don't have to worry about a competitive
Yeah.
threat.
Yeah. Do you know what? I love what you just said there, by the way, because I think it's kind of like rocket fuel more specifically, but it's also encouragement because, there's just so many people out there that believe that they're too late to the market. And, I wrote an article about this on LinkedIn actually about being too late to the market. And it was actually specifically for the podcast, which was 6 years ago. I always had the inclination. I thought that I was too late to the market because you had like Tim Ferriss, which has been around for God knows how many years, Joe Rogan that just got a deal with Spotify, and then you had like John Lee Dumas in the podcast field or whatever it is. And I always felt that was late for market. Now I reflect on this story right now, and I think that actually maybe it wasn't so bad
That's
after all,
right.
right?
That's right. Exactly. I love that.
Ladies and gents, we're going to get into coaching really, really quickly, really quick coaching. Me and Dory are going to go into coaching part. I've given Dory a bit of a snapshot about what's going on. Yeah, and hopefully, well, Dory is going to be coaching me through some different ideas about how to approach my market effectively. Okay, so where should we get started with this, Dory?
All right, Adam. Well, for the sake of our listener friends, if see if you can state in one sentence or as close to it as possible, what is the problem that we discussed that you are trying to solve? What is the thing that you would like to get insight about?
Yep. The big problem that I want to solve is for legal firms that really struggle with deal flow. So they really struggle in understanding business and marketing. And yeah, there's certain belief systems that they are always kind of wrestling with, should we say.
Amazing. And obviously, you would like more law firms to adopt the licensing of your methodology to help with this.
Yes, exactly. So I've created an IP which I license out to legal firms, and it helps them to becomes exit advisor. But more importantly, we talked about positioning in today's episode. It creates a competitive edge. It builds such positioning in the marketplace that no other legal firm or accounting firm or whatever it is, they're not doing it, and there's for good reason.
Yeah, that's great. So, how are you connecting with the law firms that you already have as clients? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's mainly through direct messaging, through LinkedIn specifically, but I'm also conscientious that they're getting bombarded with a lot of similar messages, right?
Sure.
So, oh wait, that's interesting. But we've tried different ways though. We've tried voice messages, video messages, text messages, and I found that actually voice messages were the most successful purely because it creates curiosity.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, those are all kind of outbound techniques. Talk to me about your inbound. What have you been doing on that front?
Yeah, good question. So the inbound that I would say that are most successful, obviously we have the podcast. So we have the podcast when people listen to that. We've also got my YouTube channel, and we've also created some various playbooks and some other lead magnets, such as our diagnostics as well, diagnostics assessment. That again, we like to get feedback from those clients and say, hey, do you think that this would be something of value to your client? So again, it's kind of like a two-way relationship. So, and then obviously there's content. So content creation, I generally create content around 3 or 4 times a week on LinkedIn specifically.
Fantastic. So, I'm curious, Adam, do you ever have a segment of the business strategist where you invite sort of potential clients, it's not necessarily framed as they're a potential client, but people who could be on the show and interview them and sort of build relationships that way?
You know what? Yes is the answer to that question. Not necessarily attorneys, but generally someone that might be specifically a professional services firm. Like, let me give you an example. We had a great guy who was a HR expert in his field, been doing it for like 25 years. And, he couldn't understand why, he just brought out a new book out, but he couldn't quite understand why he was going so slowly. And so I kind of like said, well, what are you doing about your positioning? What are you doing about this? And he was kind of at that stage, Dory, where he was also thinking about retirement. So yeah, so that in answer to your question, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And in terms of networking, what's just like in-person stuff? What do you do?
So that's a good one. I'm very, very, very conscientious about my time. It's probably the same for yourself. But I try to, so a couple of things really. I go to specific networking events, where the crowd hang out. It's a bit of a slow burn, I'll be honest with you. I think everything is a little bit of a slow burn. So I'm part of a couple of networking events where There's some potential clients that we have great conversations with. The other thing that I would say that we've started to do is it's just kind of workshops. So live in person workshops. So live in person workshops, and we try to do a collaboration with, say, a bank or whatever it might be that want access to that market. So we kind of team up together, and then we create a workshop. So we did that about 3 months ago.
Fantastic. I like it. Do you ever host your own events like dinners or something like that?
Well, I've done it in the past. So I've done it in the past, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know about you, but running events can be extremely energy draining. Do you know what I mean? Like the way that I do it is I create a wait list. I like to find out what the demand is in the marketplace first, and then I cherry pick who I think would be a great fit for, say, a mastermind or a dinner, as an example.
Yeah, very nice. I mean, as you're describing the kinds of things that you do, Adam, I feel like for me, a low-hanging fruit would be if you I mean, how far where are your clients? Are you near London? Are they in London?
Not really. I mean, I work with clients all over the world, so I'm a bit like yourself, kind of a what do you call it? A digital nomad, if you want to call it that, right?
Oh, I love it. That's even better. So, if you were even on a quarterly basis to say, "All right, I'm gonna host 4 high impact, high value dinners or breakfasts," or whatever it is, and maybe they're in different cities, maybe one's in London, one's in New York, one's in, whatever. Maybe it's tied to a conference that a lot of people where your clients are. And you just use it as an anchor. And this can be small, it could be you invite 3 clients and 3 prospects. And you've got this little table where, like between 6 and 8 people, perfect. It's going to be one conversation, everybody's united. You've got the clients that know you well that are already going to do implicitly the selling for you. And then you've got prospects. And thinking about the sort of outbound, marketing that you're doing, it's hard to set
It
up a
is.
sales call or whatever from
It is.
LinkedIn, but it's a different kind of thing if you are actually doing outbound and saying, "Hey, I'm having a cool dinner. So and so and so and so is coming. Do you want to come?" All of a sudden, you're offering them something kind of cool. There's a reason that they want to spend time with you, and you're seen as a little bit of a baller. So I think that could be an interesting angle for you to think about.
Yeah, no, it's crossed my mind. So I think that, I think I'm probably going to take action off the back of that. In hindsight, yes, is the answer to that. So I think that's a great idea. So I appreciate that, definitely. And I think I've come to realize that actually, especially, and it's probably the same for you, is that I don't want to work with everybody, and I don't want to work with everybody. And I only want to work with people that really do want to work with me. And then there's good alignment, right? There's no point in trying to force something if it's just no point. Like, I just don't do that. I'm not desperate, and it's just not pretty when it comes across that way. So I think you made a really important distinction.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think it sounds exciting what you're doing, and I think that one of the things that I talk about a lot with folks in the recognized expert community is thinking about the balance of sales and marketing, of inbound and outbound. And I think sometimes we get comfortable with a certain modality, and every once in a while, it can be good to shake it up a little bit and say, "Oh, I'm going to do more of the other thing," and it can bring in some new prospects and kind of tap into people who respond to different signals.
I agree. Interestingly enough, we talked about one of the things that I've become fascinated is understanding what those signals look like, what those patterns look like, and really understanding the psychology of the client more specifically, and what their emotional triggers are of why they actually buy and what motivates them or what drives decisions. So I guess my fascination is again, and I find with a lot of people what I found particularly really well is coming from a place of, hey, I would love to get your feedback on something. I'm working on something that has worked really well for me. So I'm doubling down on that. So for you guys that are listening in, by the way, just wanted to say it doesn't feel salesy at all because what you're doing is you're asking for someone's opinion, and everyone loves giving opinions, right?
Yeah,
So
that's terrific.
it's a good one. But anyway, this has been a fantastic call. I just want to say that I'm excited about your new book that's coming out, and I'm sure that. Do you know what we should do, Dory? I think we should probably do the four of us to do a call. I think that would be a great. We'd obviously have to pre-book Marshall's diary about a year in advance, but do you
Yes.
do you think he'd be down for that?
I think that's really fun. Yes, I think he probably would. So let's follow up around the time the book is coming out. That would be
Yeah.
wonderful.
That would be fantastic. Anyway, just want to say thank you so much for being on the Business Strategist today. Really, really greatly appreciate it. And for you guys that are listening, I hope that you've got a lot of great golden bombs and golden nuggets from today's call. Make sure you go check out Dory's book, The Long Game, over in Barnes & Noble and Amazon, of course. And make sure that you follow her on LinkedIn, of course. So thank you so much, and speak to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.